So I don't know what the state law is, but I would think it would be mandatory that that bridge needs to be adjusted. Either the underpass made deeper or the bridge reconstructed so that you don't have that risk. Because it sounds like there's no way you can assure you're preventing this from happening.
Let me ask a technical question to Mr. Hall or Mr. Maltz or Mr. Lebo. What is the standard height of a truck that doesn't require an overload permit? Does anybody know?
I don't know offhand.
Okay.
I think it's at least 13.5. I don't know. I looked it up a couple months ago.
Okay. Any questions for?
Robert Bianchi, Layer Drive. Mr. Engineer, I'm confused about some of the things. You said that there's errant. When you say the word errant, that means people that aren't going to necessarily follow the signage. Is that what you meant by that?
I don't remember what context I used. Maybe you can, what was my full statement?
You said we know there will be people who will be errant with regard to the signage. What did you mean by that?
Oh, that there will be some people that potentially could come up the left turn restriction that I talked about for drivers exiting side drive, talking about truckers. I'm not talking about passenger cars.
Right.
That what was suggested was posting a no left turn sign for trucks coming out of the drive. And there have been a couple of ladies who got up earlier, pointed out that that some drivers may ignore it, and that's why they identified as errant drivers, if you want to call it that. Okay. And then, in other words, there may be some drivers that'll come up and just ignore it.
Right. In your specialty of engineering, I apologize, I wasn't here for your credentials. Have you ever had any background in human factors analysis as an engineer?
No.
You know what that means?
Yeah, well, in traffic engineering, it would be a matter of, I know what you're saying. I'm not going to be able to articulate it right.
Well, you're an engineer, I'm sure you
but
can articulate it better than a lawyer.
We don't do analysis of human factors. When we see traffic accidents, we read accident reports and things, so you see patterns that affect time of day, road conditions, maneuvers, things like that.
And I'm just curious, and maybe the board can answer this better than you can. Is there going to be, or has there been, what is commonly done in cases like this, a human factors engineering expert going to testify in this case, or in this matter?
Are you addressing that?
If you know, or
no, I've never in all my years, I've never seen that done.
Well, a human factors expert would actually look at specifically the interaction of human beings and human behavior with mechanical systems and engineering systems. Is that a fair assessment?
You're testifying to it now.
I'm asking, no, see, we keep getting into this question. The question is
all I can tell you is in all my years, I've never ever seen in an application.
Mr. Maltz, excuse me. I'm going to ask that questions be asked, completed, and answers offered, completed, questions asked. Please repeat your question.
Sure. I asked you, and you said it wasn't a question. The question is my definition of a human factors expert accurate or not?
I don't know because I'm not familiar with that expertise. I don't know what the definition would be.
How long have you been an engineer?
49 years.
And I assume you read materials and you educate yourself and you go to lectures and you better yourself with regard to engineering principles. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And you can't explain after all those years' experience what specifically the field of human factors analysis is. This is an engineering field. You can't even give me a definition of it.
No, I've never been involved in that.
Wow. Well, if I were to say to you, have you ever heard it in your extensive knowledge over all these years? You've heard the term human factors analysis. You've heard the term at least.
I'm sure I have somewhere along the line.
Have you ever heard of a thing called an analysis that is done to gauge the interaction of human behavior and human beings with any mechanism of engineering, such as traffic safety? Have you ever heard of that?
In the context that you're using, obviously I've seen articles written in transportation textbooks or magazines or whatever have you, publications I'll use, or general, which talk about pedestrian activity, things like that, how people interact, that, you know, when you introduce different types of traffic control devices, things of that nature.
Well, at a facility such as this, can you educate us as to what the number one safety factor is of concern when you have trucks and vehicles in areas where pedestrians are interacting? Can you tell me the number one based on your training and experience?
Well, first of all, this is a signalized intersection, which is the most controlled type of intersection, as opposed to stop sign, which has more driver judgment as to when to proceed. And you have shoulders here, so you know they've introduced various safety aspects into the intersection. So I think well, what comes into play is vehicle size sometimes in relation to operations and such.
Thank you for that, but that doesn't answer my question. Have you ever heard of the National Safety Council?
Yes, I have.
Are you a member of it?
No, I'm not.
Why are you not a member of that organization?
I'm not a member of it.
Would you agree with me it is essentially the preeminent organization of engineers in this country?
It's a certainly prominent organization, but it doesn't mean that every traffic engineer goes and joins it.
No, I understand. Have you ever read any of the national? Would you agree with me that they're the gold standard with regard to safety, especially as it relates to human factors analysis?
Well, I'm not familiar with. In the past, I used to get articles from various federal agencies and national organizations and read them. But whether it's the preeminent one or not, I mean, I don't know where this is all going in relation to this application.
It's testing your credibility as a witness is where it's going.
Well,
so my question is, if you've read those articles, and I have, over the years, just from handling legal cases, in their book, the National Safety Council's book, which many human factors experts refer to and engineers refer to as the Bible of engineering. Have you ever heard that term being used for their publication? The National Safety Council publication, the book that has what to look out for with regard to traffic intermingling with people. Have you ever heard of that?
I've never heard it referred to as the Bible.
You would agree it's an authoritative source?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm asking you, based upon that authoritative source, what does the National Safety Council indicate is the number one safety danger when trucks are interacting with humans?
I don't know the answer to that.
Don't you think that that would be an important thing for you to know?
At this location, I believe the intersection is designed properly to accommodate the flow of traffic at the location.
Sir, I have previously come up on a number of instances, and gosh, I'd like to see this thing go through and it be perfectly safe and everybody just be hunky-dory, but we have to rely upon the testimony, sworn testimony of the quality of the witnesses that are coming before us. You would agree that that's part of what this hearing is all about, no?
Correct.
So you can understand how a person who's not even an engineer, hasn't balanced a checkbook in 35 years, I'm not a math guy in other words, is somewhat surprised at the idea that you wouldn't know what the National Safety Council indicates is the number one safety concern for trucks intermingling with people. You can understand why we would be concerned about the credibility of the witnesses that are being brought before us. Fair enough?
Well, if that's what you're offering there, that's your opinion.
Okay. And if you don't know some of those things, and I appreciate your honesty with respect to that, believe me, but if you don't know those things, does that give you any pause to think that maybe you should go back and learn them before you come before these people and tell them everything's just going to be okay?
I feel comfortable in the testimony review that I presented.
If I were to tell you that the National Safety Council indicates, and probably all the literature, at least I have read about human factors analysis, that it is almost presumed that you can guarantee people will not follow signage, would you disagree or agree with that conclusion?
Well, I believe that some people will not follow the signage.
Well,
the signage is more of what I would call a benign control. It's got to be reinforced with police enforcement, the actions of the applicant in this case to impose conditions on the truck deliveries, on the routes they're to take. But there's Title 39, which is the police enforcement, that they can grant it to the municipality to issue tickets, things of that nature.
I'm familiar with that. And I'm also familiar about how stretched the resources of our police departments are to fight crime, to protect us in our homes from burglaries, to deal with serious investigations run through the county prosecutor's office as opposed to sitting as a traffic cop at this property. You would agree that that would diminish the effectiveness of our police department if they have to sit at a site and watch to see if people are doing what they're supposed to or not. You would agree as an engineer that that is a human factors concern.
I'm not going to address that, whether the police will be at one location or another. I'm not saying that you'd have the police officer posted here all the time.
Right.
I'm not going to go and start addressing that.
Well, you don't have to be an engineer to know it's a matter of common sense as to drain on police resources.
That's not part of anything I discussed in my testimony.
So let's assume for the sake of argument, we were talking before, and I'm just curious about this too, when cars are coming in and out and you're gonna have the signage that's there, the sign that's there that says you can only go one way or the other, is that a sign under Title 39 that can actually be enforced by the police when it's on private property?
Well, it's going to be, I would assume, they have to present it, the applicant's going to be presenting it to the New Jersey DOT as part of their application to put it on the plan and have it approved as part of the application. The approach to the intersection is part of the intersection design and the jurisdiction of the state. This is a state highway. So I would think that the sign itself would be part of the intersection control.
Is it your testimony that you believe that by putting those signs at that location, that, thank you for your service, sir, the police officers of Morris Plains would be able to actually enforce that?
Well, the municipality would, I believe, pass an ordinance granting, the applicant would agree to Title 39 enforcement of that, and then also you want to have that instituted as part of the DOT application.
When the lady was saying before about the stroller, or I believe she said stroller once before, she was walking on this occasion, what prevents there from being some sort of physical barrier to assure that the trucks cannot go in the opposite direction, since we know that there will be, as I quote your word, errant individuals who will not follow the sign?
Oh, you mean somebody, truck that wants to make a left turn out, for example?
Right.
Well, there's nothing physical to prevent them.
Could that not be part of the construction, to do something to not have to worry about a sign and all these concerns, to mandate, or by way of a physical barrier so that it just cannot happen?
I don't know what that would be.
Well, I'm not an engineer, you are, sir.
I've never seen somebody institute something like that. So I don't know what you would do to randomly control a vehicle coming out of that nature at the signalized intersection.
Oh, okay, so maybe I misunderstood that.
Maybe I misunderstood you.
Yeah, again, I don't construct things, I'm not an engineer. What I'm trying, I have seen them in my own life. Barriers that are put up in certain configurations of things so that the truck cannot make an improper turn. Physically is unable to do it. It must go in the direction we wish it to go. Now, as an engineer, you must know that, right?
I'm sure there must be some location somewhere, some configurations that they can do that, but here you have a mixture of cars and trucks. So you're talking about randomly controlling one, making a left out, but not the other. So it's a matter of how do you control it?
Well,
I don't know.
is that a question?
I wouldn't know what to design. I don't design things like that.
What, I'm sorry, I wasn't here at the beginning, so I apologize. Are you a traffic engineer specifically?
Yes, I'm a traffic engineer.
And you can't, in your mind, come up with a creative idea as to how to prevent that?
I don't know offhand what we would do at this particular location to where both trucks and, if we're talking about trucks improperly entering the left turn lane that want to improperly make that left turn, but cars are permitted to make the left turn. So you're talking about a device that's going to control one, but not the other.
Right.
So I'm not sure what type of, I'm sure somebody could design something, but I'm not sure what it would be.
I believe that I heard you indicate that you were addressing certain questions that you knew were of concern to the public from the previous traffic expert that had testified. Is that right?
Wait, can you say that again?
That you knew that there were some concerns about the traffic pattern in trucks improperly making left and right hand turns. You knew that when you came into this hearing.
It was expressed by the public previously,
Right.
previous hearing.
Would it have been a good idea to assure us and calm us down about these issues? Because I happen to live, just for point of information, on Littleton, 202. Are you familiar with that area?
Yes.
By Malapartis?
Yes.
Do you live in the area?
I live in West Orange. It's not right nearby.
Okay.
I've been through here many times, this area, but I live in West Orange.
Have you ever had the joy in the morning or in the evening of trying to travel from a place like Lair Drive on 202 where I live and to go towards the bridge on 202? And that's where 53 is intersecting, going through all that, going underneath the bridge. Have you ever had the pleasure of that?
Well, I've traveled that section, if you're talking about that specific section.
You know, what do you think about the way it is now without all the trucks?
Well, it can be a very busy location. Different times of the day, it moves well. At peak hours, it gets very congested, and it has a variable designation for the right turn lane. For the right lane, I should say.
So knowing all of that, and coming here to testify and knowing the concerns of the public, would it not have been a good idea to have checked to see, let me see what I can do to assuage the concerns of the community, and as an engineer with 40 years experience, maybe contact the National Safety Council, contact a colleague, look up the literature, see what I can do to put a physical barrier up so that the errant drivers that you self-admit are going to occur will not be able to block that horrible area already with traffic. Would that not have been a good idea to calm us down a little bit?
Well, as you express it, it sounds like it's great, but I think it goes beyond what we would, what I would normally do for a review of this nature.
Right. So basically, it's not about getting the best option. It's about just getting by. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Chairman, that's not a fair characterization of Mr. Walton's testimony.
I think it's very fair.
Mr. Maltz can say it's not fair to say.
Sister and scratch your name.
I mean, you can answer the question, is what the chairman said.
The question was that fair to say?
No, but what was the original premise he was presenting?
The premise is that when I asked you, knowing you're coming here, knowing our concerns, knowing that you self-admit that there will be errant drivers, which I think we all agree here, that it would have been a good idea to have seen if we could develop or construct something that would have calmed us down so that we know that we don't have to worry about the errant drivers who don't follow the signs, which happens all the time, but come up with a solution so the trucks have physically no capability of moving in the wrong direction. You indicated to just that you weren't required to come up with the best solution. Is that right?
Well, there were solutions when I came and I heard the testimony. There were some solutions offered and suggested by others about restrictions on turning movements for trucks, putting up the signage, which I admit is more benign, as I pointed out to you. What you're offering is something that I don't know how what you're offering would be instituted in this particular location.
Right. I have, again, I'm not testifying, you are, but I have seen situations in which things were constructed in a way on the property of a business where cars could move in either direction, but due to the nature of the size of a truck being much larger, it was unable to because of the physical barriers that were put up. Are you familiar with any of those techniques?
Not offhand that I can think of.
But you
And
don't.
also, you presented things that you supposedly have seen, but it also depends on the circumstances of the site that you're talking about. They may not have the same physical relationship to the roadway that this does. They could be completely different types of layouts which could lend itself to some sort of control.
I never cease to be amazed about what an architect and an engineer can do when motivated. And I'm not talking about every site, I'm talking about this site. Are you telling me it cannot be done?
Offhand, I don't know what somebody would institute here to do what you're suggesting.
What did you do to look into it? We already answered that, you didn't look into it. Is that right? Is that a fair statement?
I understood what was being proposed, I agreed with it, but I don't see what else can be done to be more positive.
But you're not saying there can't be something done because you indicated previously, let me just finish my question. You indicated previously that you did not look into an optimal situation, just what was proposed. Isn't that what you testified to?
I heard what was proposed, I agreed with what was proposed. I don't see other possibilities that could be instituted. I did make comments on geometrics, pedestrian crosswalks and such. Obviously, I've looked at this area that we're addressing, and not just the left turn for the truck prohibition, but also related to the right turn in. So I certainly took a look at safety aspects at this location. It's not like I just rubber stamped what
But it's
we
not
did.
safety, we're talking about traffic. I'm mainly getting at traffic. This poor lady over here has already spoken twice about the safety issues. I don't know them as she does. I'm talking about traffic. Just another question. When you're coming out of that property, you're making a right onto 53?
Well, what's your question?
Will you be making a right out of 53? Is that what is proposed?
If you're making a right out of 50?
When you come out of the facility, will you be making a right-hand turn out
Well,
of the facility?
it comes down as one lane, a single exit lane, and it widens to accommodate the, considering there might be a drive on the other side, the right lane would be a through right lane, and then there's a short left turn lane marked for a left turn.
And
That's what's there today, and that's what's being proposed.
so that would presume that eventually the truck could get onto Route 10, is that right?
Eventually, if he wants to go northbound on Tabor Road, they would make the right turn onto northbound Tabor Road.
What happens if there's an accident? I mean, certainly as an engineer, you're not a human factors engineer, but a human factors engineer would take into consideration that things aren't perfect and there are accidents. You don't need to be an engineer to know that there are accidents. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
What happens, what do these trucks do when there's an accident on 10 or on Tabor Road?
Wait, can you say that again?
What do these trucks do when there's an accident on 10 or Tabor Road? In other words, the traffic isn't moving.
Mr. Chairman, isn't this well beyond the scope of the testimony that we had during tonight's hearing? We're talking about accidents on Route 10. That was not the subject of tonight's testimony. This questioning is supposed to be limited to the subject of Mr. Maltz's testimony this evening. This is a second bite at the apple over questions and issues and concerns that were fully vetted at an entire hearing a few short weeks ago.
Well,
So there was specific discussions regarding turns in and turns out that we heard tonight that I think this is tied.
We haven't had any discussions about turns on Route 10 tonight.
I don't know what we're so afraid of. It's so good.
It's a plain, simple idea.
So tonight we are intended to limit questions to the testimony that we heard tonight.
Right.
So it's not being afraid of anything.
Oh no, I'm not talking about you, sir. I'm talking about the lawyer that keeps objecting when things get a little dicey.
No, I keep objecting when we have repetitive questioning, when we have irrelevant questioning, when we have questioning that goes beyond the scope of what the rules and procedures of this board are supposed to be, and when we find ourselves going well beyond the period of time that the municipal land use law affords for applications of a permitted use on a state highway going over irrelevant and repetitive questions.
You just got done
That's why I
saying
have an
that it
issue.
wasn't testified to, so how could it be repetitive?
These are questions that were asked and answered when Mr. Olivo testified a few weeks ago.
And he's back again.
And hasn't said a word with
Excuse me,
regard
sir,
to that.
excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'll direct my attention to you as opposed to this guy.
That would be great.
Yeah, and it'd be good if you showed the same professional courtesy.
I
Gentlemen.
Chairman, he has given testimony about and answered a number of questions about the ingress and egress. It is clearly a relevant, and I think very important question to ask him as a traffic engineer. What is going to happen when the obvious occurs, when there's an accident or when there's a traffic jam? What are the alternative plans? Where will those trucks go? I don't understand, based on what he's testified here today, how that's not a legitimate and relevant question. And by the way, this is just, I'll say it again for purposes, since we have a court reporter, this is a hearing. This, even according to the rules of evidence in a courtroom, would be admitted for cross-examination for credibility purposes alone, and certainly substantively. But in a hearing like this, the rules are even more relaxed than that. I think it's an appropriate question. I think the board would want to know the answer to this.
So as I indicated before, I think it is a relevant question, given the turn of discussion here tonight. Mr. Maltz, can you answer that?
Well, what you're talking about is if there's an accident up at Route 10 somewhere, what would happen to traffic, trucks, or anybody, I assume, exiting the site? Could be cars.
Right. Now, if there's, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but just to add, if there's a sign that says you can't go the other way,
If there's a sign
that tells you can't go in the other direction.
well, what happens in certain circumstances that you describe, you wind up in an emergency situation and you follow the directions of a police officer who can direct you and to situations other than what you might follow by signage.
Do you think there would be a possibility under those circumstances, given errant drivers not following signs, especially when they're unable to move their loads and they've got a time schedule, that they may just decide to go the other way, the wrong way?
I can't answer that.
Sorry. I'm not asking you if
First, you were talking about if there's an accident around 10, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What you just posed, is that related to that?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that if there is in one of those places where the sign says you can't go right or can't go left, we've established that there will be errant drivers that even when traffic is perfect, they're going to still violate those rules. What happens to the town in a situation in which there's slow or heavy traffic or an accident and traffic is stopped? Do you believe it is likely that those trucks will violate that sign and go in the other direction? More likely than not, yes or no?
There's a possibility that could occur.
All right, thank you.